Good Tuesday morning. You ready to dig back into God's Word together? This week, we're talking about the topic of dreams. And, I've read about dreams in both the Old and New Testament, but I didn't always give it the thought I should have. And I don't know if you have or not. But God, throughout the Bible history, has used dreams and visions being daytime dreams. We're going to look at just a few more today, again from the Old Testament. Tomorrow, we'll look at God's use of dreams in the New Testament. And Thursday, we're going to talk about how God is using dreams and visions today. And He is. He is. Not as commonly as in the Bible. Well, I guess in some ways He is. So you'll hear all about that on Thursday. But what are some of the famous times God has used dreams in the Old Testament? Another one that I like, and I like the ones yesterday. Joseph had dreams. His brothers didn't like it. They end up selling him into slavery in Egypt. But God used dreams there. Pharaoh had a dream, and Joseph was able to interpret it. And on, the whole story there. We move on into the book of Judges and Gideon. Remember Gideon? And he was trying to, they were fighting with the Amalekites. And he's about to go into their camp, and God had whittled his numbers down to only 300. Remember that story? And now Gideon was really nervous. So he and another soldier sneak into the camp one night. And here's in Judges chapter 7 at verse 13, this is recorded. Gideon arrived just as a man was telling a friend his dream. Now they're listening from the bushes or something. But a friend, one of the enemy, had a dream. God gave them a dream. And the man said, I had a dream. A round loaf of barley bread came tumbling into the Midianite camp. It struck the tent with such force that the tent overturned and collapsed. What a dream, huh? We all have crazy dreams. And of course, like they would do, they'd try to figure out, well, what did that dream mean? What was actually happening? So his friend said, well, this can be nothing other than the sword of Gideon, son of Joash the Israelite. God has given the Midianites and the whole camp into his hands. And when Gideon heard the dream and its interpretation, he worshiped God. God gave that Gentile a dream, and his friend who could interpret and know that it was about Gideon. Well, Gideon found that so encouraging that he then had the bravery he needed to attack and indeed did conquer the Amalekites. What? God is so good. He uses dreams so often. Jumping ahead, this is a very famous time that God used a dream. Although I'm not sure that everyone understands that it was in a dream that God made this offer to King Solomon. Do you know what offer that I'm thinking of? It actually came to Solomon in a dream. God was very, very pleased with Solomon. And Solomon was seeking the Lord in his heart and was living a life honoring of the Lord. And indeed, he would be the one to rebuild the temple. Remember, David was not allowed to rebuild the temple because he was a man of war. But Solomon was not. So he was given that privilege. Solomon had this famous dream. It's found in 1 Kings chapter 3 at verse 5. And it says this. At Gibeon, the Lord appeared to Solomon during the night in a dream. God appeared to Solomon in a dream. We can't look directly upon God. No one can. And Solomon could not. But God appeared to him in a dream. And God said, ask for whatever you want me to give to you. Remember that offer? An amazing offer. But it was in a dream. And Solomon answered, you have shown great kindness to your servant, my father David, because he was faithful to you and righteous and upright in heart. You have continued this kindness to him, and have given him a son, me, to sit on his throne. The Lord was pleased that Solomon had asked for this. And he says, what is it he asked for? Verse 9. So give your servant a discerning heart to govern your people and to distinguish between right and wrong. Solomon famously asked for wisdom, for God's wisdom. We're instructed to this day to do that, and we learned this from Solomon. But Solomon learned it. Well, actually, I'm not sure how the Lord worked in his life that he would do such a thing, because God commends him that he didn't ask for great riches or great honor or great fame. He just asked for wisdom. Wisdom to govern God's people, Israel. And God granted that, and then gave him riches beyond description, just as kind of like a bonus. Thank you, Solomon, for being so righteous. God continued to use dreams throughout his Old Testament. And then a very, very famous one, of course, was when God gave Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, a dream. It's found in Daniel in chapter 2 and 4. But here was Nebuchadnezzar's accounting of it. Chapter 4, verse 4. I, Nebuchadnezzar, was at home in my palace, contented and prosperous. Then, verse 5, I had a dream. I had a dream that made me afraid. And as I was lying in my bed, the images and visions that passed through my mind terrified me. And you know the rest of the story. He goes on and he tells it throughout the whole chapter. He sought all the wise men that he could find. He brought everybody in from around the kingdom, his kingdom. And no one could interpret that dream. Except one. Eventually, he finds Daniel, who is able to interpret his dream. And of course, that in turn gives honor to Daniel. And eventually, I believe it also gave King Nebuchadnezzar, made him a believer. Because later on, well, Daniel witnesses to him, and the king says, "Oh, most sovereign high." I don't know. I think it did. But the whole thing begins, that whole story begins with Nebuchadnezzar saying, I was at home and I had a dream. God uses dreams. I want, when we read this in the Bible, that we actually believe, we know that it's true. And we know that God uses them, not real often, but he does. I'm learning. I hope you are too. And tomorrow we're going to look at New Testament dreams and visions. And they're exciting also. See you tomorrow.
Oh, come to the Father through Jesus the Son, and give him